What is up, guys? We are back again with another video, and in today's video we are going to go through a little bit of program design, right? So to start this off, again, my goals: I want to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's kind of the main focus in my, we'll call it, athletic endeavors, but obviously I like to stay fit, I like to stay strong, I do like to look a certain way, or try to look a certain way. So like resistance training is obviously a part of that, but you always have to keep in mind the goal has to stay the goal, and that means that my resistance training has to complement my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu rather than detract from it. Like, I don't want my resistance training to be so all out, so intense that I do my resistance training earlier in the day. Like, I don't want it so that it comes around to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu time and I'm just knackered. That's not what I want to have going on. So I have to be a little bit cautious, and I have to plan in my training a little bit more intelligently, we'll say, right? So the program I'm running currently, it's a classic four-day split. It's a lower upper split. And if you are one of the individuals that has purchased, our 4-day ebook templates, you'll recognize this straight away. But this will be helpful for you as well, because it kind of goes through some ways you can start, picking different exercises, kind of go through exercise selection, also progression methods, and a whole lot, right? So without, babbling on for another 20 minutes, let's actually get into the program. Right, so we have the program here, and effectively what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the decision-making process for the exercises I've chosen, and then how you would then modify this for yourself, or how you should be thinking about modifying a program for yourself. So we'll just start off. Day one, it is a lower body session. This generally comes after a day off for me. Both times during the week, I usually take Sunday off and I usually take Wednesday off. So I'm coming in fully rested, or as fully rested as can be, to this lower body workout. Now, some people like to put an upper body workout first in their week, but upper body is potentially going to impact your ability to train lower body, whereas the other way is not necessarily the same. And what I mean by that is, you could be training back the day before training legs. That's going to limit your hip hinging, and it's potentially going to limit your squatting. So it is a consideration for a lot of individuals. It's not going to be the make or break of the program, but I do know for me that I do find my upper back is a little bit more fatigued going into a session the day after training upper body. So I try to keep it lower first, upper second. However, if you want to prioritize your upper body and your legs are so juicy that you're like, no, I don't want to train legs as hard as I know I can, do your upper body first, But anyway, back into exercise selection. So the first thing we have to pick is a squat variation. And I know for me, I know what works for me. I know what exercise I feel the best, what exercise I can progress the best, what exercise leads me to being the least beat up for my other endeavors. And for me, that would be the front squat, right? Now, in terms of the front squat, like I have here 10 to 12 repetitions, and for most people, that's going to be a seriously challenging endeavor, right? For most people, high rep front squats are not something that I would recommend. For most people, your upper back is going to fatigue, your external rotators, all that kind of stuff is going to fatigue before your legs are limited, right? However, my back is probably the strongest point of my body, because even when I do a back squat, it's basically just a back lift. So for me, not a huge issue. I have good endurance in the upper body, the upper back, so it's not a real issue for me. You could also change this to a lower rep range, and then, when you're periodizing your training, change it to an even lower rep range, again, the next block. But again, for me, it's not a huge issue. For you, as an individual, it may be, and you may be better off choosing something that doesn't have the upper back, doesn't have the back in general being the limiting factor. You could choose a leg press variation here. You could choose, maybe a back squat variation. You're like a very high upright squatter, and you're like, yeah, that's perfect for me. Or maybe you have, aspirations in a low bar squat, and you're like, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to let the rest of my training reflect that, the back is a little bit more challenged with that, especially, the hips, lower back, that kind of stuff, right? And again, front squat, for me, I generally go 1 to 3 sets, so we'll just say 3 for that. Now, the reason I have 1 to 3 is because some days I'm coming in after, being beat up, even though I have a day off, a rest day the day before I come into this session, you know, I can still feel a little bit beat up, and I want to know what's the minimum I need to do, and then what's really the kind of maximum I need to do to keep myself moving in the direction I want, right? And for me, again, I know from trial and error that 1 to 3 sets seems to be a good place to be, and it also gives me a kind of a triple progression, if that makes sense, in terms of I have the ability to progress sets, I have the ability to progress reps, and I have the ability to progress weight, which is great when I have the consideration of, you know, actually doing a sport as well, because that's what people kind of forget as well, that, you know, if you're just doing the gym, you know, it can be very easy to come in every single session and, you know, add weight or add another rep. But, you know, you need more avenues to progress when you do have other fatiguing events going on in your week. So again, that's the front squat for me. Now, hip hinge, personally, I would probably get the most from an RDL. However, I just don't have the time to do it. And what I mean by that is, you know, I don't have the time to be loading up like 4 or 5 plates on an RDL and repping it out. It just takes too much away from my overall recovery, first of all, and time in the actual gym itself, you know. So for me, I've chosen good mornings, and they seem to be working out quite well. I do actually really like good mornings. I get a little bit of a better connection with the hamstring, again, probably because it's such a huge lever arm, and, you know, I am like nearly 6'6", so that lever arm is extended just even that little bit further than a quote unquote normal person. And again, for this, we've got 3 sets. If that would do that for me. 3 sets for that. Again, 10 to 12 reps. Again, I have the availability to play around with that triple progression method as well. Secondary quad exercise. For me, I've just been doing quad extensions the last while. You know, I get a good connection with my quads. It's not hugely fatiguing. It allows me to accumulate more volume for the quads, without it, again, being too fatiguing to my overall system. And again, like, I'm training in the morning. I don't have the time to be, you know, loading on 30 plates to a leg press or whatever to, you know, maybe accumulate more volume for the quads. So it makes sense to choose something that is low fatigue and easy. I literally pull out the pin and put the pin in and select my load. I don't have to be messing around with loading on a load of plates. Again, I'm training in the morning before college, before all the work I have to do, and then I have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the evening. So I have to factor that into my ability to actually train. You know, I have an hour to train, you know. Next thing then, it's literally just a lying leg curl. So don't really need to change anything with this. Lying leg curl. Again, I'm doing 1 to 3 sets. We'll just put 3 down there, 10 to 12 reps, you know. And if I've really given it my all in these last 3, maybe I'm not getting the most out of this lying leg curl, but for me, like, it's not a huge issue. I'm relatively strong in the hamstrings. Like, I do want to ensure that I'm keeping that strength up, because it is quite valuable to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, even though you may not think it initially. Like, there is a lot of, you know, bringing that heel towards your hips. Both a seated leg curl and a lying leg curl, they're both applicable in this situation. I have access to a lying leg curl, so I use that one. You know, calf raise, I don't know why I train calves, but I do. They do seem to be growing. Maybe I'm just lying to myself. I'm actually doing just a donkey calf raise for this, just because, again, I'm quite tall. All the machines that are like standing ones are not fit for use for the height or the length of my body, so I'm just doing a donkey calf raise because it's a little bit easier to adjust. After that, it's not written down here, didn't have it added in, but I am actually doing seated calf raises as well. Again, for both of those, I'm doing 3 sets and, well, 1 to 3. It's always 3 sets because I'm like, I need to get the calf volume in. And again, seated calf raises after that. Then after that, I am doing cardiovascular work. You know, I'm doing more of a high intensity, but I'm actually going to talk you through that another day. Then the upper body one, let's just bring this down so it's easier to see on a page by itself. You know, first thing we have is a horizontal press. You know, for me, I've actually chosen, you know, the bench press. It's something that I want to progress. I haven't really focused on it throughout my entire training career. Like, there was when I was, you know, starting out in this game, a time when I was like, yeah, man, I want to be great at bench press, you know, proper bro, like, yeah, got to get that bench in. But I neglected it for a good 5-7 years, so I'm building it back up to where it was, and then I want to get stronger at it overall. It is obviously also applicable to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although it's not a great position it puts you in if you do essentially bench press someone off you. You know, you're basically ripe for an armbar or a whole host of other moves as well. But it does give you some potential extra wiggle room in your jits to actually have the strength to effectively bench press someone off you if you get into a bad position, you know, they're inside control or whatever, you know. So that's that one for me. The next thing then, I've chosen a bent over row. If I could spell. Bent over row for that. Again, I could choose something that has a chest support, but like for me, I actually really like the bent over row. I can effectively do the bench press and then stay in that same like station at the bench press and then do my bent over rows there. I don't have to go off somewhere else and, you know, find a bar and do whatever. It's literally just right there. I can be effectively doing 6 sets straight through bench press into bent over rows. And, you know, it saves a little bit of extra time during the actual session. So that's where I'm at with that. Then vertical press, I'm not doing a vertical press. I'm doing dips, which is not what this program is obviously suggesting. But the reason for that is I get a lot of anterior delt development, a lot of, you know, stress through that anterior, or rather a lot of tension through that anterior delt. So it seems to be working for growth of those. And also, again, it's a little bit more applicable to jiu-jitsu as well, because, you know, you're going to be pressing people more in a downward thing. If you're kind of moving away from them, you know, you're framing off them, it's a little bit more applicable. The only time you're going to be using like that overhead movement, obviously you need to have stable shoulders, strong shoulders, so that's obviously, you know, very vital to jiu-jitsu success. But again, you have to focus in on what's going to give me the most bang for my buck. And I already said I want to progress my bench press. It's something I want to build. Dips are going to contribute to that, and, you know, maybe I want to build my chest up a little bit more as well. And as I said, or rather as I didn't say, with the overhead press, the only time you're really using that in jiu-jitsu is maybe when you're, you know, walking someone's arm up and you're trying to get their arm over their head, you know. Like obviously there are other positions you get into, and it's not really the best thing to be selecting, you know, your movements based on the positions you get in. Like you do want to have some kind of like generalizable strength overall, but again, for me, dips make sense, you know. After this then, we've got chin-ups. That's what I'm doing for my vertical pull, you know. So again, with all of these, I'm doing 3 sets, 1 to 3 sets even, and they seem to be progressing well. With this, I'm just doing a lateral raise. Dumbbells for this, don't really care too much. And obviously I want to build my delts. Obviously I want to keep ensuring that they are strong, and, you know, I'm progressing with that. But, you know, I'm mainly just doing that for an aesthetic, you know, purpose, you know. Tricep variation, bicep variation, I kind of just switch these around. You know, with these, I kind of do a little bit more. We'll say 3 to 5 reps, or 3 to 5 sets even. But again, that's just because I want to accumulate a little bit more volume than I am getting in other areas, you know. I just kind of switch these up, you know. For about 4 weeks or so, I'll do 1 variation, maybe even 2 weeks. I just kind of switch it up, get a good bit of tension through my triceps. Like I'm already progressing all of these things. I don't care too much about this. It's basically just get a pump, feel good, you know, ensure that the arms are feeling strong, you know. Like I'm at a stage where, you know, I can't really load up, you know, an easy bar bicep curl anymore. Like I'm not going to lash like 60 kilos on that or something, you know. Same with like a tricep press down, you know, I'm nearly at the stack or whatever. It's just hard. Like my body is moving rather than the stack, if that makes sense. Same with, again, like skull crushers and stuff. Like, you know, it's just, there's too much wear and tear for the actual benefit of that exercise. And that effectively, right, even though I'm doing 4 days, that effectively is the program, right? Because I'm repeating that twice per week, you know. And the reason for that is, like, I do think that most individuals are going to benefit from a greater degree of exercise selection. And this is both true for, you know, if you are involved in a sport. I think, you know, having an exposure to a variety of exercises, so you can really hone in on different areas and get different adaptations. For me, and I should also say, and as a beginner, I think you should be practicing a variety of moves and not just, hyper specializing in a handful of moves. However, for me, I already know my response to different exercises, how they affect my body, how they affect my fatigue, how they affect the, general wear and tear on the body, like, the overall stress to the body. And for me, I'd rather pick exercises that I know work well for me, that I can get, they're bang for their buck exercises. I'm willing to trade off the bit of specialization in those exercises, for I'd rather trade off the generalizability of having a broader degree of exercise selection for the specialization in those few exercises, because I am further along in my training career, so I'm not getting as much benefit from having a huge variety. It's kind of, we'll call it even confusing to the body, in terms of I'm not getting a huge benefit by training something once per week. Like there's another program which I do every so often just to kind of keep things fun, because you obviously have to factor in the mental aspect of things as well. And that is effectively, I do that upper lower, those two, or those lower upper, those two that I showed you. And then I'll do a lower upper, except the other 2 sessions during the week, one will be more posterior chain focused and the other one will be more, we'll call it vertical focused. And again, there is a program exactly like that in the 4-day ebook. If you've bought that, you'll see what that one is as well. I think the one I'm going through is number 1. I think the one that I'm talking about is number 2. So there is that ability to chop and change based on where you are in your training career, what you have going on, what you want to progress on. Because for me, I know these exercises work well for me. I know they're a low fatigue, low, we'll call it damage to the body. Like there's no excess stress in different areas. Like I could choose a back squat, but I know for me, my lower back is always fatigued then, and that's not great for jiu-jitsu, like, because you're always in this hunched over position, this kind of flexed over position. So having a fatigued lower back going into those training sessions, it's not going to be effective for me long term. Whereas with front squats, I don't really get that, and also you could also go, oh, it's a hyper specialized to my sport because, the bar is choking me out. It's no different than someone else choking me out, but I'm not really using it for that. And this also brings up a wider conversation, and something that we're actually going to talk about on the podcast in the future is, choosing exercises based on your sport. It's not really a great way to think of things. Yes, you should bias your exercise selection to exercises that help with your sport where it can, but it's not like you get this huge benefit from being like, oh, this is the exact position I get into in my sport, I need to have an exercise to train that exact position. Yes, if you've noticed that you are weak in that position or you need to be strengthened in that position, 100% go for it. But at the end of the day, you effectively need to find exercises that work for your body rather than work for your sport, if that makes sense. I'd rather see you get strong in exercises that lead you to being a well-rounded, strong individual rather than being like, oh, I'm hyper-specialized in these few exercises that are required for my sport, but, I find it difficult to, do a bodyweight chin-up, And so you have to factor that in as well, your overall development as, we'll call it, an athlete, but also as an individual. And yeah, so that's effectively how I've set up my program. The way I've periodized it then is we'll do 4-week block of that with the 10 to 12 reps, and then I do a 4-week block of 6 to 8 reps, right? And again, same thing again, 1 to 3 sets with all of those. And yeah, I do layer cardio on, which is something I'm going to talk about in a future episode because I want to talk about a few particular things. But yeah, so for that's essentially how I'm setting up my program. It doesn't have to be that complicated. You effectively just need to work from some sort of template, some sort of progression template, and then it has to, use, we'll call them scientific principles. Like I know for me there, for my quads, I'm effectively getting 12 working sets per week, maybe a little bit more because I am doing some, we'll call them like quad dominant, like I'm using the Airdyne, twice per week for some conditioning. So I'm getting some residual training effect, on my quads from that. Hard to truly quantify, but it plays a role. But we'll say 12 working sets. Same for hamstrings, 12 working sets. Calves, yeah, 12 working sets. Chest, again, 12 working sets. Back, 12 working sets. Yeah, okay, one of them's a bent over row and one of them's a chin up, so not really the exact same, but still, if we just encompass the whole back, it's 12 working sets. Shoulders, we're only getting 3 working sets, 3 to 5 working sets. per day, then it's 6 to 10 working sets, because I'm doing 3 to 5 sets for my lateral raises. And then same with the biceps and triceps. I'm doing 3 to 5 working sets. So that equates to, whatever that is, 6 to 10 working sets per week. And generally recommend, 10 to 20 working sets per week per body part. But again, you have to factor in that I am also doing a sport on top of that. So I could, if I really wanted to, be like, yeah, I'm going to get my 20 working sets in. I'm going to bump up my volume all the way to 20 working sets. And I probably would get faster, quicker, better results. However, my jiu-jitsu would probably suffer then. Like, there's only so much recovery capacity the human body has in a given time period. And you need to be prioritizing what you want to prioritize, Like, same again, I was choosing exercises like on the lower body day. Like, I was choosing lower fatigue exercises because I want to do well at this other sport, Like, I'm not trying to be the absolute strongest I possibly can, I'm not trying to be a power lifter. I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder. This is supposed to enhance my life, longevity, health, all that kind of stuff, and also enhance my sporting ability. It's not supposed to take away from it, because this is something that a lot of people get into when they start thinking about designing a training program for their sport. They'll follow a routine and not realize that that routine is for someone that's all they have going on, So you're doing something that's essentially detracting from what you want to get better at, So you have to keep your priorities straight. You have to keep your goals, like I said before. You have to actually set them out and actually prioritize them, rank them in what you want to actually train and what you actually want to get better at. And then designing the program around that is a lot easier, Like, obviously you can use a template. Like, that's why we sell 3, 4, 5, 6 day templates on our website. So it gives you a starting point, and then you can modify it based on what you have going on, based on what you want to actually prioritize and train. For example, in those workouts, if I was like, yeah, actually, I want to really build my shoulders, I could prioritize the volume towards that. That second, it says a vertical press on that workout, like, I could do a vertical press, and that would lead me to then having, the 12 to maybe even 20, depending on how many lateral raises I do then, working sets for that body part. Yeah, my chest is now not getting the 12 working sets. It's only getting, 6. But again, if that fit into my goals and that was actually something that was actually helping with my overall development, having body parts that you're keeping on kind of maintenance while you bring up other body parts, that's a really smart way to actually think of your overall training program. You shouldn't be thinking like, I need to bring up everything all the time. Like, obviously, yeah, that's great. If you can do that, happy days. But for most people, after a certain stage in their training, they're going to have to focus in on a number of exercises that work well for them, and then also work on allocating volume according to their actual goals and according to their actual needs. Anyway, guys, that's it. Relatively long episode, but I just wanted to talk you through my kind of setup of my training program, and then how I'm thinking of progressing that overall. Like, I do want to have some relatively good lifts in the gym, both in the front squat and the bench press over the next year. But again, I do want to also keep the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the forefront of my mind, and it's a little bit hard now with college, work, everything at the moment, but come June, like, currently I'm training 4 days per week in jits, but come June, I'm thinking of really pushing that up to kind of 6 days, and that Wednesday and Saturday, I'm thinking of having a jiu-jitsu session on both of those days, but again, has to work with my overall recovery abilities, and it has to fit into my overall schedule. So I'll have to see how that plays out. Anyway, guys, if you do have any questions, drop them below. Do the usual, like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and we'll catch you in the next episode.